Where does Texas A&M fall in the SEC hierarchy after their upset win of Notre Dame?
You are Locked On Aggies, your daily podcast on the Texas A&M Aggies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome in. You are Locked On the Texas A&M Aggies. I'm your host, Matt Galatzan, publisher of Texas A&M Aggies on SI. Thank you for making Locked On Aggies your first listen every single day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Zach, Texas A&M had a major win, historic win for the program on Saturday in what was arguably the most exciting game of the college football season so far, which is wild to consider when considering there was an overtime game between Georgia and Tennessee right beforehand. But it was a tremendous game, and it was a win that A&M had been searching for really since the days of Kevin Sumlin, I guess. I mean, even arguably before that. But it was their first ranked win on the road since 2014. Their first non-conference win on the road against a Power 4 team since 2002, and their first ranked win on the road against a non-conference team since beating Penn State in 1979.
I remember that one.
Yeah, we were both young men at that point, but it's a historic win for the Aggies, not just in the sense of what they've been trying to get off their backs, but also where they fit into the college football playoff narrative, because Texas A&M has never really had a chance to sniff the college football playoff over the last few years. Now it seems like they are, in a position to really assert themselves into that conversation. So what I wanted to do today was go through our SEC power rankings and where A&M fits in there now, because chances are if you make it into the top 5 of the SEC at the end of the regular season, you're going to have a really good shot at making the college football playoffs. But, we have our list over at Texas A&M Aggies on SI. This is exactly what we did last week. The list over there was released. Zach and I are going to go down and kind of break down what we think about it. But Zach, right at the top are the Georgia Bulldogs, and I think that's fine.
Yeah, I mean, especially the way that they beat Tennessee and plus beating an SEC opponent on the road. Hard to argue with that one. I mean, Georgia, the way they pulled that off after we were, kind of saying, they didn't beat Austin Peay too badly as they should have. They just pulled one out of their hat, and why should we be surprised when it comes to Kirby Smart and the Bulldogs? That was just an amazing game, amazing win for them. Hard to argue with that one, just because it was an SEC game. And when we're talking about SEC power rankings, that's obviously going to have to factor in pretty heavily. So, I don't have any problem with that one at all. And then at number 2, you got LSU. Wasn't the prettiest of games for both sides against Florida. I mean, 20-10 final score. You would like for that to have been a bigger margin of victory for LSU, especially when they intercepted DJ Lagway 5 times. But that one was at home. And so when you get 5 interceptions, you expect a little bit of a bigger margin of victory there. But when you're able to get an SEC win like that, again, hard to argue with LSU being at number 2 just because of the SEC win. But right below LSU at number 3 is Texas A&M. And I think this is a good spot for them when it comes to just SEC power rankings. Again, when it comes to just SEC power rankings, because I think that, we could argue that A&M looks better than LSU does. Especially with this, most recent win over Notre Dame. But A&M hasn't played a conference game yet, so that's why they're a little bit lower than Georgia and LSU. And I think that's a good spot for them. Like we're not too surprised that A&M pulled out the victory. We predicted that they would on the show. I think the way that they did it, I don't think anyone would have saw that coming. That game was crazy. It was just back and forth. Check off any, besides like maybe a safety or or a pick six. This game had everything you could ask for. Just an amazing college football game. And obviously for an A&M fan, just one of the most magical moments for the program in a very long time. So A&M's at number 3, and I don't have a problem with that. I know you probably don't either.
No, I think that they should arguably be higher, as a matter of fact. I think they've looked better overall than LSU has this season, offensively at least.
Yep.
Defensively, you could argue that LSU has been the better team, so you're kind of splitting hairs there. But I think that the biggest thing about this for me is A&M jumps all the way up from number 10 in last week's rankings up to number 3. And I think when we had this discussion last week, I think we had A&M around like 6 or 7, if I remember correctly, when we were talking
Yeah.
about it. So even in our personal rankings that we're doing here together, we have them rising a few spots, and it's certainly warranted. They have looked extremely good over the last couple of weeks. The Notre Dame win, they shattered a lot of Aggie stigmas, in my opinion. Their offense was explosive. They were creating explosive plays downfield, but they came up in the clutch. And quite honestly, they didn't play their best football game either. They had 13 penalties, I think, in that game. Marcel Reed, I believe, threw an interception. So, just incredible stuff from Texas A&M to overcome all of those things. The injury to Bryce Anderson, which we hope to find out more about as the week goes on. But to overcome all of that and still be in a position to win, and even look, we all know that Notre Dame's holder fumbled the ball, and that's what set A&M up for a chance to win the football game. But they still drove down the field, and they still came up clutch when it mattered, and that's what matters the most to me. So that's why they've slid up the rankings so far for us and for our ranking over on Texas A&M Aggies on SI. I think that we still have to see how these things kind of fold out over the next few weeks, because a lot of teams haven't really played a ton of competition yet. Georgia and Tennessee, I think, both played their first real games of the season this past week, and both of them looked really, really good. Oklahoma, I think, played. Who did they play again? They played Temple. Yeah, they dominated Temple, which means what? I'm not exactly sure. So I think A&M just by virtue of their resume slides up this board for us, and the way that they were able to win on Saturday slides them up the board for us, because I still think they are capable of much, much more if they can clean up the penalties and fix a few leaky holes in the defense.
Yeah, for sure. And the only thing that was really holding them back in the resume over the first 2 weeks, and it is the first 2 weeks of the season, so there's only so much you can do, was that they hadn't played, really anyone yet. So it was hard to, really justify them being super high up on the power rankings, because you got to play good teams first, and obviously week 3 was going to be the biggest measuring stick up to this point, and very clearly they deserve to jump up really high, and it's only going to go up from here. And that's what I like about the way Mike Elko has been, preaching ever since last season, is that, I don't know his exact words after the game, but it was essentially just like, okay, yeah, we celebrate the win, but that's all we do. We celebrate the win and we move on. You want to celebrate the small victories as you go through a season, of course, because this was obviously a huge win. But I like the mindset that this is just the beginning of where we're going. We expect more of ourselves, and so you really want a head coach to preach that, not only preach it, but then also see it translate as the season goes on. Because I honestly think that the way the season ended last year for A&M, might be good for them moving forward into this season, because they're able to learn some hard lessons about what it's like being at the top of the SEC standings and then seeing yourself drop all the way down to the point of where you're losing a bowl game in comeback fashion against USC. And that was I kind of like the way that ended for them, because now it means a lot moving forward into this season. And so you really like the way Elko has been preaching and approaching a big win like that. It only means better things moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And before we head to the next segment, we're going to go through the entire list of power rankings here for us. Number 1, as we said, Georgia. Number 2, LSU, with their 20-10 win over Florida. 5 interceptions for DJ Lagway, not good. A&M at number 3, Oklahoma at number 4 after a 42-3 win over Temple. Tennessee at number 5 after that narrow loss to Georgia. Texas drops down to number 6 after a very, very ugly 27-10 win over UTEP. It's not very often that you hear a 3-score win is ugly, but that's exactly what it was for the Longhorns. Alabama at number 7, climbing back up after a just absolute demolition of Wisconsin. Ole Miss at number 8 after beating Arkansas. Vanderbilt jumps up to number 9 after dominating South Carolina. Missouri at number 10 after a 52-10 win over Louisiana. They look pretty dang good, I'm not going to lie. Auburn, number 11, still undefeated. 2-score win over South Alabama, not the best result, but they got the job done. Mississippi State with a 63-0 win over Alcorn State at number 12. South Carolina drops all the way to 13 after their loss to Vanderbilt. Arkansas at 14 after losing to Ole Miss. Florida at 15 after I said, again, that ugly loss to LSU. And then Kentucky at number 16 after beating Eastern Michigan, which means absolutely nothing to us. All right, so let's go to the next segment, Zach. We're going to take our first break, and when we come back, we're going to give out our game balls for Week 3 to who we think really deserves the most credit for this win for Texas A&M. So stick with us after this break, and we'll be right back. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. The only daily fantasy app where making the right call can actually pay off. You and I make decisions every day, but on Prize Picks, being right means cashing in. With football back, Prize Picks is the simplest and fastest way to get in on the action. Just pick more or less on 2 to 6 player projections, and you can turn your takes into real prizes, all in less than 60 seconds. It's quick, easy, and honestly my favorite way to follow along with football. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONCollege for $50 in lineups after your first $5 play. Prize Picks, it's good to be right. A lot of Aggies stuck out in that win over Notre Dame. You could talk about Marcel Reed. You could talk about Scooby Williams. You could talk about, DJ Hicks on the defensive side of the ball. You could talk about a lot of guys. For me, there are a couple of players who really stepped up and deserve the game ball. Marcel Reed is in that conversation, but we're going to talk about him in our third segment, so we elected to leave him out of this one. But if there was a third game ball, it would probably go to Marcel. So I'm going to give you my first one, Zach. This is a guy that I think has been absolutely electric all season long. And then on the biggest stage that Texas A&M has had yet, he stepped up in the biggest way. And that is Mario Craver. He continues to be this team's best offensive weapon. He had 7 receptions for 207 yards and a touchdown. He was the AP Offensive Player of the Week nationally. He leads college football in receiving yards, I believe. I think Mario Craver has more yards receiving than like some teams at this point. I want to say I saw some crazy stat. I'll have to look that one up. But he has been absolutely on fire, and he really got A&M going early in that football game. They were down, and Texas A&M needed to make a play. Marcel Reed hit Mario Craver on a wheel route. 86 yards later, he's in the end zone, and he didn't stop there. He had plenty of other big-time catches, plenty of other big-time moments in that game. And for me, and I know the guy you're going to talk about in a second scored more touchdowns, but for me, Mario Craver was the MVP for Texas A&M on Saturday.
Yeah, it's hard to argue with that one. I mean, whenever he transferred in this past offseason, I don't think we could imagine us saying that he would be leading the country in receiving after 3 weeks. There was tons of talk about how talented the receiving room was with the new additions, but that is just so impressive. For him to break loose on the 86-yard touchdown, that was pretty impressive. And man, you're just really excited about what the rest of the season holds for him and for Casey Concepcion. So that was pretty awesome performance there. And yeah, hard to argue with that one. But for me, it's easy to say Marcel Reed gets a game ball. He obviously was super clutch. Wasn't perfect by any means at all, but became a big when it mattered most. But for me, I think the difference in the game was A&M's ability to convert in the red zone. And that started with Le'Veon Moss. And so the fact that he had, he had 3 touchdowns, I think all 3 in the first half. Yeah, 2 yards, 1 yard, 1 yard. Those were his touchdowns. if A&M has to settle for field goals there, they obviously don't win the game because they found themselves down 17-7 in the second quarter. Notre Dame could have easily started to pull away, but Le'Veon Moss powers in for 3 touchdowns in the second quarter. And so that was the difference in the game. Yeah, of course, the red zone conversion on 4th and goal with Nate Borgature, that touchdown obviously is going to make all the highlights. Le'Veon Moss isn't going to make the highlights with his kind of boring runs into the end zone, if you will. But that made all the difference. We obviously saw against Texas at the end of last season, A&M's inability to convert on the goal line with Le'Veon Moss out made the difference in that game and ultimately kept them from going to Atlanta for a potential SEC championship berth. And so being able to convert like that in the red zone on the goal line, we see a lot of teams not able to do that. And so for him to come up big like that, he didn't have a 100-yard rushing game. It was kind of, a tough game on the ground. It was more through the air for A&M. But Le'Veon Moss being able to convert those and, not having to settle for field goals was obviously huge. And not even settling for field goals, but potentially going for it on a 4th down and turning the ball over on downs. That was really big for me, in my opinion. And so, game ball goes to him because it was a little bit boring in that regard. It wasn't as electric on the ground necessarily. But yeah, those 3 touchdowns were huge in the second quarter and obviously made the difference in a game that was super back and forth.
Yeah, I agree. He was incredibly clutch for Texas A&M when they were in those goal line situations. And if it wasn't for Le'Veon Moss, we might not be talking about a Texas A&M win here. So good call there. I looked at that stat while Zach was talking, by the way, about Mario Craver. He has 433 yards receiving this season. Okay. That is more than 17 other FBS teams total, their entire team has combined for. And you also look at KC Concepcion, who has added 227 yards, which if my math, which I'm not going to do live on air, I'm going to use a calculator here. So 433 plus 227 is 660 yards. Okay. That is more than you go all the way up to number 70 at Tulsa. They have more receiving yards between the two of them than 66 teams in college football, just between the two of them. That includes TCU, which is bonkers to me because Josh Hoover has been incredible.
Yeah.
That includes Clemson, Colorado, Michigan, Memphis, Texas, Boise State, Houston, a lot of power for Auburn, Florida State, Notre Dame, a lot of Power 4 teams in here, Louisville, North Carolina, Kentucky. So very, very impressive stuff from the two transfers there, especially Mario Craver, who has just been unbelievable this season. So game ball to Mario Craver, season ball right now to Mario Craver. Also a game ball for Le'Veon Moss there. But Zach, let's take our next break because when we come back, we're going to talk about something that might take a minute. Marcel Reed is now getting his name mentioned in the Heisman race. So Zach and I are going to talk about that, whether we think he should be there, whether he has a chance to actually get there at the end, and our feelings on that. So stick with us after this break. We'll be right back. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. College football is back, and I couldn't be more excited. The tailgates, the rivalries, the energy in the stands, there's just nothing like it. But let's be real. Actually getting tickets can feel like more of a battle than the game itself. Endless queues, hidden fees, prices jumping at checkout. That's why I use Game Time, the app that gives the advantage back to the fans. It's the easiest way to score last-minute tickets at the best prices with no surprise fees. What you see is what you pay. I pulled up Game Time, and in just a couple taps, I saw amazing deals. I'm talking about your favorite college football games for as low as $25. So take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download the Game Time app today. That might have been my best ad read of all time, Zach. Okay. It was very smooth. I'm very proud of myself. So, Marcel Reed, he has now gotten his name into the Heisman. He's in the Heisman race at this point.
Yep.
He has thrown for a lot of yards. He's been pretty efficient. He's been clutch, much improved off of last year. I'm pulling up this list of other Heisman contenders, and it's quite fun to see his name in here right now, because College Football Report, which is just an account on X that's like a college football aggregate account, they released their list of Heisman power rankings. Number 1, they have Carson Beck, which, a couple games for Miami, he's been good. He's a notable name. Fine. He's not my number 1, but he's up there. Number 2, and the guy that's my actual number 1 right now, John Mateer. He's been electric for Oklahoma. He looks like the best quarterback in college football right now. He's at number 2. Marcel Reed, all the way up to number 3. Nowhere on this list is names like Arch Manning, Garrett Nussmeier, Cade Klubnik, Jeremiah Love, Jeremiah Smith, Ryan Williams. None of the guys that were at the forefront of the list coming into the season. Marcel Reed has ascended all the way up to the top to number 3 after not being on the list really for anybody heading into the week. And I think it's well-deserved. He wasn't the most efficient throwing the football against Notre Dame, but he came up when it mattered, Zach, and I think he deserves recognition for that.
Yeah, for sure. And on the kind of stage that A&M was playing on, I mean, obviously you don't expect Marcel Reed to go out there and play perfectly, but that hardly his sometimes inefficient stats from that game and missed a few throws, that hardly matters when you look at the way that he came up clutch, especially on the last drive, running for that 3rd and long with his legs, obviously throwing the game-winning touchdown, had Mario Craver on a deep cross at the beginning of that drive to kind of get A&M into range there for the score. So there's a poor interception in the first half. Some throws he missed badly. That hardly matters when it comes to being able to come up clutch, in the big time moments. Because we've seen quarterbacks, they can go through an entire game, play really, really well, but then maybe they shrivel up when it really matters most, and then that's all you remember, And so what really matters is what happens, what you do at the end. I mean, the fact that he had 17 completions and finished with 360 yards. That's pretty incredible. Look no further when it comes to if this guy's a passer or not. Obviously, Mike Elko has made that clear. Yeah, it's just really interesting. We talked about this season being kind of an interesting one because there's not really a clear number 1 team heading into it. But when it came to the Heisman race, I feel like a lot of people around the country felt pretty comfortable about who was in that Heisman race. And after 3 weeks, it looks completely different than what anyone could have expected. Like you mentioned, to your point, no Jeremiah Smith, no Arch Manning, no Cade Klubnik, no Garrett Nussmeier. Those guys are going to have to do a lot over the next couple of weeks to get themselves into that conversation. I mean, John Mateer, we knew he'd be a talented guy coming in, but I don't think anyone expected him to be potentially near the top of that list. Same with Marcel Reed. So, yeah, of course, everyone in College Station, we've been high on Marcel Reed heading into the season, but we had to see it translate, onto a big stage. And it's not that A&M won the game, but it's the way that they won the game. It's not like he didn't, he only had 100 yards passing and Le'Veon Moss runs for 200 yards or something. No, Marcel Reed, was a major part of why A&M won that game, and he deservedly is in the Heisman, contention or the Heisman race right now. It's obviously still pretty early. But yeah, and then, little side note there, Mario Craver getting some Heisman buzz. It's going to take a lot for him to be able to get to New York. But if you're leading the league or leading the country in receiving yards at this point, you definitely deserve some of that Heisman buzz. But who's the guy throwing him the ball? Marcel Reed. And so if he continues to do things with his legs and his arm, there's no reason why he can't at least be, in New York at the end of the season.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you talk about Heisman buzz. RG3, who I know is a little bit controversial in his takes sometimes. I get it. But he has Marcel Reed number 1 on his top 10 Heisman frontrunners. He has Mario Craver number 6. So that's people are starting to recognize Marcel Reed for what he is. We talked about last week. I don't remember if it was in a show with you or not, or if it was with Harrison, but this was his chance to really put himself on the map and get people really talking about him, and he took full advantage of it, and he deserves it. One thing that I think that Marcel has working against him right now is his accuracy throwing the football. I think eventually, if he doesn't get that figured out, it could end up being an issue for Texas A&M down the stretch against, potentially better offensive teams than Notre Dame. So far this season, he's only completing 58.6% of his passes, which isn't great. And if you look at the true accuracy percentage that was released by PFF, his percentage is at 63.5%. I'm not exactly sure how this stat is calculated exactly, but I believe it's catchable footballs that, maybe drops are considered into the equation, such and such, or passes being catchable. He is below Arch Manning and Cade Klubnik and DJ Lagway, who just threw 5 interceptions. So that's something that he needs to work on, which I think is going to come. I'm not too concerned about that, but overall, he's had a tremendous, tremendous season. And he's not just doing it with his arm either. He's doing it with his legs as well. He is currently second on the team in rushing with 25 carries for 142 yards and a touchdown. He's only thrown 1 interception this season. He's only taken 1 sack. His quarterback rating is 160.3. He's averaging 8.8 yards per completion. Against Notre Dame, he averaged damn near 10 yards per completion, which is almost a first down every time he throws the football or every time he completes a pass. So those are all very, very impressive numbers. And look, he's going to have plenty of opportunities to continue to put his name into the Heisman discussion coming forward. A&M is on a bye week this week, but after that, they have a ranked matchup against number 22 Auburn, who, for all intents and purposes, should still be ranked after this weekend. Assuming they take care of business, at least they're at number 11 Oklahoma, which is going to be a really tough one. So we'll see how that one goes. Jackson Arnold's going to have to step up big time in that game. But after that, there are also going to be plenty of other opportunities as well. They have road game or a road game against LSU still on the schedule. They've got road game at Missouri. They got a road game at Texas. There's the matchup against Mississippi State. It's not going to be a joke. So a lot of other opportunities for him to prove himself going forward, and that's pretty exciting. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that when it comes to Heisman, winners, sure, big time stats matter. But in my opinion, if Marcel Reed really wants to, finish off the season as a candidate for the Heisman, it's about coming up big in the big time moments and then adding stats on top of that. And there is ample opportunities for him to shine on some of these bigger stages as the season goes on. Yeah, you look at like Notre Dame's schedule, like Jeremiah Love, if he's going to have to just put together a massive season statistically to get into the Heisman race, because Notre Dame, they're kind of out of those big time spotlight games the rest of the way, where Texas A&M is going to have tons of opportunities to continue to show what they can do in front of the whole country. So, I hope Marcel Reed and A&M can learn from the way last season ended and not get too high, not get too low, and stay really, really grounded, because that's going to, lead to them having a really successful season, and, both as a team and individually for some of their players. So we're going to have to see what happens.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if he goes into LSU and plays well and leads them to a win at Death Valley, takes them into Austin and beats Arch Manning and the Texas Longhorns, it's going to be real hard to keep him off the ballot. So that's going to be something to watch moving forward. But that's going to do it for another episode of Locked On Aggies. Thank you so much for making Locked On Aggies your first listen every single day. But hey, it's another big moment for Locked On. College football fans, Locked On and Fire TV present College Football Kickoff, your ultimate college football weekly preview. Drake Toll of Locked On Big 12 leads the conversation alongside two-time AP Coach of the Year Gary Patterson, former college star Jesse Holley, and your local Locked On experts. It's a college football preview that only Locked On can do. Catch the College Football Kickoff every Thursday throughout the season, only on Fire TV. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to our channel, give me a follow over on Texas A&M Aggies on SI and on X at Matt Galatzan. Follow Zach on X at Zach Dimmitt 7 with 2 M's and 2 T's, and we will see you next time.